Everything changed the moment Charleston White crossed paths with Pooh Shiesty's parents. Not just any parents, but figures whose names carry weight in Memphis streets that don't forgive disrespect. What happened next wasn't something you could predict, it was something you feel. Because when those certified street veterans stepped to Charleston White over what he'd been saying about their son, the energy shifted instantly. Behind all the jokes, the live stream rants, and the viral antics, Charleston White had been speaking on someone whose roots run deep in a city built on survival. And when reality finally caught up to him, it hit harder than anything the internet could prepare him for. This wasn't content anymore. This was consequence, and there's proof to back every second of it. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand what led here. For months, Charleston White had been going off about Pooh Shiesty, mocking his situation, speaking on his prison time like it was entertainment, like it was something to laugh at. He talked like someone who thought there were no limits, like nobody would ever step in. He built views off pain, turned real-life struggles into punchlines, until one day he wasn't behind a screen anymore. He was standing face-to-face with people who don't play about family. And no, this wasn't internet drama. This wasn't clout chasing. This was something real. Because Charleston White didn't realize who he was about to encounter. A woman who raised one of Memphis's most respected street voices, and a man whose name once carried serious weight across the city. These weren't ordinary parents. These were individuals shaped by years of surviving in one of the most unforgiving environments in America. Now here's where everything takes a turn. Because the moment Charleston White made Pooh Shiesty's incarceration his content, this confrontation became inevitable. Let's talk about his mother, because she's not who people think. She didn't come from comfort. She came from pressure. From South Memphis, the same streets that produced names like Yo Gotti and Young Dolph. And before she ever met Mob Boss, she already understood the rules. She knew what it meant to survive. No weakness, no hesitation, just instinct. So when she and Mob Boss came together, it wasn't romance, it was strategy. Two, it's people building something in the middle of chaos. Their lives were surrounded by investigations, threats, enemies waiting for mistakes. Every day carried risk. Every move mattered. But through all of it, they stayed focused on one thing, family. And when everything was on the line, she didn't fold. She stepped up. She held everything together. Money, connections, reputation, decisions that could end lives or save them. That's the kind of woman Charleston White was speaking on without even realizing it. But the story doesn't stop there. To really understand the weight behind all of this, you have to look at Pooh Shiesty's father, Lontrell Williams, Sr., known across Memphis as Mob Boss. This wasn't a man playing a role for cameras or chasing clout online. His name carried real influence in streets where reputation meant survival. What he built wasn't small either. Authorities spent months watching his movements, trying to piece together how far his network actually reached. And even then, they were only scratching the surface. The title Mob Boss wasn't something given lightly. It came from years of calculated moves, connections stretching from the Mississippi Delta all the way to the Arkansas border. Routes were controlled. Deliveries were organized. Everything moved with precision. His operation wasn't loud or reckless. It was structured, disciplined, almost corporate in the way it functioned, while others in the streets moved flashy and unpredictable. Mob Boss stayed controlled. He invested in property across South Memphis, using locations as meeting points and safe spaces. He built legitimate businesses to support his image, creating a layer between him and anything illegal. To outsiders, it looked clean. But behind that image, everything was carefully managed. Every risk calculated. That's what made him different. He didn't move like a street hustler. He moved like someone who understood the system. And for a while, it worked. Until 2007. That's when things started to unravel. Law enforcement had been watching one of his locations for weeks. An apartment on Porter Street that looked abandoned on the outside. Quiet, empty, easy to ignore. But inside, it was something else entirely. A full operation. And the moment police decided to move, everything exploded. The door came. A chaos followed. People running. Glass breaking. movement in every direction. And then suddenly a pit bull charged straight at the officers, not barking, not warning, attacking, the kind of reaction that doesn't happen by accident. That dog wasn't just there for protection. It was trained for war. And when the situation finally settled, what police found inside confirmed everything they suspected: drugs, money, weapons, tools. That showed just how organized the operation really was. This wasn't random, that this was built, and it ran deep. But even that wasn't the darkest part of the story, because years before that raid, something else happened. Something that changed everything. Young radio DJ named Rebecca Glenn was found dead inside her apartment. Strangled. The case shocked Memphis, and somehow mob boss's name became connected to it, not as the one who carried it out, but as someone linked to what happened after. According to reports, he was charged as an accessory, and that's where things took a darker turn. Rumors spread fast. Some believed it was tied to music, to power, to control over who got exposure and who didn't. Nothing fully proven, but enough to shake the city, because after her death, investigators uncovered something cold: stolen credit cards. Property being sold. Moves that showed no hesitation, no remorse. And as more details came out, the picture became harder to ignore. This wasn't just about crime. It was about influence, fear, and the kind of control that doesn't come without consequences. Even when the case didn't lead to the harshest outcome, even when the sentence stayed light, didn't erase what people believed, and it didn't change one truth. Once your name gets tied to something like that, tick never really leaves you. This is the world Pooh Shiesty was shaped by. Not rumors, not stories, reality. And that's exactly why what Charleston White said didn't just come off disrespectful. It crossed into something far more serious, because he wasn't just criticizing, he was laughing, mocking, turning a young man's downfall into entertainment for views. At one point, Charleston White even questioned how someone so young could speak the way Pooh Shiesty does, implying that kind of mindset didn't come from music, it came from something darker. And that's where the tension really started to build. After Pooh Shiesty was sentenced to 63 months in federal prison, Charleston White went live, and instead of showing any kind of restraint, he doubled down, laughing, smiling, talking like the situation was a joke. He described Pooh Shiesty as someone who had been out of control before prison, moving reckless, acting without limits. And now, according to him, all of that was over. He painted a picture of a man who would be forced to fall in line, controlled, watched, restricted at every step. And then came the part that really hit a nerve. Charleston White started framing the system like it was a lesson being taught, like everything happening was deserved, like prison was going to fix him. He spoke about supervision, about probation, about structure. But the tone wasn't concern, it was satisfaction. That's what people couldn't ignore, because it wasn't just commentary anymore, it felt personal. He went even further, suggesting that someone who once carried a certain reputation in the streets would now be reduced to something harmless, that everything that once made him feared would disappear the moment the system stepped in. And in a culture where respect means everything, that kind of statement doesn't just pass, it creates pressure. Because when you speak on someone's name like that, especially someone connected to a family with real history, you're not just talking, you're inviting a response. And that's exactly what happened. Because eventually the people behind Pooh Shiesty had heard enough. Not fans, not Fowler's family, people who had lived through things Charleston White only speaks about from a distance. And when they decided to step in, it wasn't for attention, it wasn't for cameras, that was for respect. This wasn't online anymore. No comments, no filters, no audience, just a real moment face to face. And in that moment, everything changed. Because Charleston White quickly realized something he hadn't considered before. He wasn't dealing with internet personalities, he was standing in front of reality. These weren't ordinary people standing in front of Charleston White. These were individuals who had lived through federal cases, survived real street wars, and carried the kind of history that doesn't fade with time. And the moment it clicked for Charleston White, everything shifted. The energy, the posture, the confidence, it all changed. Because this wasn't a debate. This wasn't content. These weren't people interested in going back and forth online. They came with one purpose: to make it clear that speaking on their son, laughing at his situation, and turning his reality into entertainment was something they would not accept. No discussion, no warning, just a line being drawn. And then came the moment that sealed everything. She stepped forward and introduced herself. Calm, direct, no hesitation. I'm Pooh Shiesty's mama. And just like that, the weight of everything hit. Because Charleston White already knew what he had said. He knew the jokes, the comments, the tone he had used. And standing there face to face, it wasn't funny anymore. It wasn't content anymore, it was real. Even he admitted it later that something about her presence made him move different. That fear kicked in instantly, that whatever confidence he had online disappeared the moment he realized who he was dealing with. He didn't argue. He didn't push back. He backed off immediately. You could see it in his body language. The shift was undeniable. The same man who had been laughing on live streams, speaking freely, without hesitation, suddenly became careful with every word, respectful, measured, almost unrecognizable. And after that encounter, everything changed. The tone, the energy, the approach. The same voice that once mocked Pooh Shiesty's situation became quiet. Apologetic, he even went as far as promising that he wouldn't bring his name up again. And that right there, that's what real pressure looks like. Not online reactions, not comments, but a moment that forces you to check yourself instantly. Because there's a difference between talking tough and standing in front of people who live it. That confrontation exposed everything. It showed the gap between internet confidence and real-world consequences. It showed what happens when words leave the screen and enter reality. Because Charleston White built his platform critiquing a lifestyle he never fully lived. But in that moment, he was standing face to face with people who had. And there was no performance left. Just truth at the end of the day. This wasn't just about one man speaking out of line or parents defending their son. It was about something deeper: respect, loyalty, boundaries that aren't meant to be crossed. Because when it comes to family, there are consequences, real ones. And for Pooh Shiesty's parents, this was never about attention. It was about protecting their name and making sure it was never disrespected again. What this situation really exposes is something deeper than just one confrontation. It reveals how toxic internet culture has become. A space where pain turns into profit, where someone's worst moment becomes another person's content. Charleston White wasn't just speaking on Pooh Shiesty, he was benefiting from it, turning real consequences into entertainment. Taking a young man's situation and reshaping it into something people could laugh at, react to, and share. And that's where the line starts to blur. Because at what point does commentary become exploitation? Now, the real question isn't just about what already happened, it's about what happens next. Will Charleston White actually stand on what he said after that encounter? Or was that just a moment of pressure? Something that fades once the attention dies down and everything goes quiet again? Because history shows patterns, and patterns don't break easily. But one thing is clear, he's now aware of exactly who stands behind Pooh Shiesty. And that awareness alone changes everything. This moment also forces a bigger realization behind every name, every headline, every viral moment in Heave. There's a family, real people. People who've lived through struggle, loss, and pressure most outsiders will never understand. So when someone chooses to joke about legal situations or celebrate someone falling, it doesn't stop with that individual. It spreads. It touches everyone connected to them. And that's where things get dangerous. Because disrespect doesn't exist in isolation. It echoes. So now the question is simple. Did Charleston White actually learn something from this? Or is this just another chapter before things repeat themselves? Because once the cameras are off, once the comments slow down, once the moment fades, the real choices begin. And whatever comes next, people will be watching: the streets, the fans, the ones who remember. So what do you think? Did he change, or is this just temporary? Drop your thoughts below, because this story isn't just about one confrontation. It's about accountability, it's about consequences, and it's about understanding that no matter how big your platform gets, some lines are never meant to be crossed, because when they are, there's always a response.